Good morning, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for being here today. We're officially starting our webinar on Building Your Organization's Executive Coaching Program, brought to you by Career Partners International, Florida Caribbean region. My name is Ariane Para, Client Relations at CPI Florida Caribbean. A few housekeeping items before we get started. If you have any technical difficulty throughout the presentation, please call this number provided by Citrix. Do not call our offices. This webinar is pending approval for HR certification into 2 credits. Also, if you have a question throughout the webinar, please type it into the question box in your right panel. We will have a question and answer session at the end of the presentation where we'll try to address all the questions asked. Also, this webinar is currently being recorded and we'll also have the slides available for you after the webinar is finished. Please keep in mind that they are copyrighted and may be used by others, but with the proper recognition paid to the authors in Career Partners International and Hogan assessments. We'll also ask 3 poll questions throughout the presentation, and we'll also be sharing the results of the poll questions asked during registration. Now I'd like to present our speakers for the webinar. Our moderator will be Mr. Robert Newland, CEO of Career Partners International, Florida Caribbean region. Our first speaker is Dr. Yvonne Moreno, Senior Executive Consultant at CPI Florida Caribbean. Next we'll have Ms. Trish Kellett, Director at the Hogan Coaching Network. And Mr. Sid Snyder, Senior Executive Consultant at CPI Florida Caribbean. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Robert Newland, President and CEO at CPI Florida Caribbean region. Mr. Newland has a degree in management, has continued his education with programs at Harvard Business School. He's been a regional leader for Latin America and a member of the board of directors at CPI Global. He is an entrepreneur, business executive and career coach, talent management strategist. Among his certifications are Hogan Assessments, Manager's Coach Learning Series, Mergers and Acquisitions Advisor, and Career and Retirement Coach. With that, I give you Mr. Robert Newland.
Thank you, Ariane. Good morning. I hope everybody can hear me okay. Welcome to a very interesting program that we have set out for you today. And I'd like to begin with sharing with you some information on today's agenda. First, we're having, of course, this introduction. Then Dr. Moreno will talk about how to build a culture of coaching for organizational performance. Ms. Trish Kellett will talk about the Hogan assessment tools, which are pretty amazing tools for executive coaching. And then last but not least, Sid Snyder is going to talk to us about how to manage executive coaching resources, something he has done for a long, long time. We'll have a Q&A session, and as Ariane mentioned, we'll cover some of those questions at the end of the program, and then we'll do a closing. Now, what brings you here? Many people signed up, and there are a number of reasons of why they came to this webinar, which I found very, very interesting. Some want to hear about industry experts. Others are looking to start an executive coaching program within their organization. That's great. The next 2 are interesting, which is they're tied to, how do I get support from either my CEO or senior management? How do I build a case to create, to use coaching in my organization? Some people are looking at individual development plans and using coaching. Some, of course, want to learn about the Hogan. Some want to learn about CPI Florida Caribbean. I found very interesting the one where people are looking to embedding coaching into the evaluation of frontline management, frontline supervisors. That's tremendous. And of course, you have people that want to use this as part of the way in which they develop the skills of senior staff. The one that I found the most, the one that really caught my eye, which I left for last, was teaching managers to be coaches and not dictators. And granted, not everybody is like that, but we must remember that oftentimes in organizations, staff will think of management as dictators and not coaches, and that can be detrimental to organization performance, and that's why we're having this conversation today. Now, you did answer a number of questions when you registered for this event, and I want to go through that. Well, actually, in a moment, first talk to you a bit about our organization, Career Partners International Florida Caribbean. What do we do? Well, we help clients drive performance through people. So yes, we're in the people side of the business, and we do that through services in executive search, leadership development, and outplacement. We have a presence in Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Palm Beach, Tampa, Orlando, Jacksonville, and San Juan, Puerto Rico. And if you will permit me, un saludo a mi gente de Puerto Rico. We also have a global presence. We have, as part of the Career Partners International Group, 200 offices globally. That includes the Americas, both North America, South Central America, Europe, Middle East, and Africa, and also the Asia-Pacific region, and we've been in existence for about 25 years. Good for you to know, to affiliate organizations, Newland Associates, through which we do our executive search practice, and also affirmative action planners or services through which we provide services in labor compliance. Now, a bit of the company we keep, and I think that's very important to all of us because it sort of contextualizes when we talk to you, where do we come from? Our feedback to you is not just based on information we come up on our own, but actually is based on many years of working with clients like the ones you see here. So I hope that the company we keep gives you an idea of the quality of content that you're going to get today. Now, I did mention a while ago that you have some questions during registration, and I want to go through two of them right now. The first one is, should coaching and leadership only be part of the business strategy organization? And of course, most of you said yes, and we happen to agree with that. You can have a great business strategy, but if you don't have the ability to get your leadership aligned through coaching and leadership development, you're more likely to fail. And I think Yvonne is going to have a great presentation around that area. The other one, which I found very telling, is that a lot of you feel that where you need the most coaching is in middle management. And that's interesting because oftentimes we think of executive coaching as something we do for senior leadership. But what you're saying is, look, there is a tremendous need in middle management and also with supervisors. So I found that pretty interesting. Now, what I want to do is I want to hand it over to Dr. Yvonne Moreno, who's going to talk about building a coaching culture for organizational performance. A bit about Yvonne. She is based out of Puerto Rico and sometimes out of Miami, Florida. She's a PhD in psychology. She is a professor, researcher, and consultant. She's done work in the U.S. mainland, Puerto Rico, and Mexico. She has published research. She's an ACPHR, certified mediator and CPC, and she's worked in a diverse range of industries, as you can see here, which includes pharmaceutical, healthcare, banking, and education sectors. And now what I'd like to do is hand it over to Yvonne so that she can do her presentation. Yvonne, welcome.
Thank you, Robert. And good morning, and thank you again for joining this webinar. During my presentation, I will be discussing what is coaching, what are the benefits of coaching, why it is important to create a culture of coaching, and I will show you a case study from a company using the Manager as a Coach program. Next. I would like to share two definitions of what coaching is. And coaching is partnering with clients in a thought-provoking and creative process that inspires them to maximize their personal and professional potential. Coaching is also a powerful alliance designed to forward and enhance the lifelong process of human learning, effectiveness, and fulfillment. So we see that coaching has to do with provoking thinking and creation process, inspiring, maximizing, and creating alliances for increasing opportunities, effectiveness, and fulfillment in collaborators. And when we are talking about creating a culture, we are talking about spreading all this throughout the organization. So this is why coaching is essential in today's organization, as it is compatible with increasing business needs of a work environment that fosters collaborative work, creative and collective thinking in order to produce new ideas and solutions to the challenges that organizations face nowadays. Next. So we have a poll here in which we would like to know what do you think regarding the areas in which organizations will get the most benefit of coaching. So I will ask you to press A if you think that that the area is leadership development, B if it's performance, C if it's talent development and succession planning, D if it's employee engagement and retention, and E if it is about critical skills development.
Yvonne, we have a number of people filling out the poll. About 40% have voted, so let's give it a few more seconds if you don't mind.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I like it. Some people are really thinking long and hard about this. That's great.
Yeah, well, it's a difficult question because they have to decide on one.
Okay, here are the results. Let me know if you can see them.
Okay, interesting. Okay. Okay, so you have decided that leadership development is the most important area with a 39%, performance improvement follows with a 23%, employee engagement and retention 16%, and talent readiness and critical skills with 11%-ish. Okay, thank you very much for your answers. I would like now to show you what other organizations, other leaders from other organizations answered. And it's pretty much similar to what you have already answered, at least in the first two. So, can we have the next one? Well, in this poll, the first was leadership development with a 70%, the second, performance improvement with a 59%, performance optimization with a 53%, and talent readiness with a 50%. Employee engagement went with 35%, and skills development with a 30%. Thank you again for your answers. Well, I'm not sure if you can see the slides. I am not being able to see them, but I will continue for the sake of time. But I will let you to know that you will have the opportunity of looking at the slides, and I apologize for that. So, what are the benefits of coaching? In order to know a little more about that, the International Coaching Federation conducted independently a survey that they assigned to PricewaterhouseCoopers, in which they explored the benefits of coaching. The first outcome that they found is linked, or that I'm going to be presented, is linked to work performance and results management. 70% of the interviewees said that professional coaching improved performance. 61% said that it improved business management. 57% said that it improved time management, because there are some people that might think that coaching, implementation of coaching takes time. Well, here it shows that it saves time, and 51% said that it improved team effectiveness. Another outcome that it's very interesting and comes out from the research is that coaching helps to build self-confidence of employees to face challenges. which is critical in meeting organizational demands, as I have said. 80% of the participants said that it improved self-confidence, 72% said that it improved relationships, 72% said that it improved communication skills, while 67% said that it improved work-life balance, which is another conversation that is very pertinent nowadays in organizations. And I am sure that we can agree that all these areas are critical for leaders and employees in the workplace. An interesting result comes when they ask about the benefit of coaching and the return on investment. The vast majority of the companies, which was the 86%, said that at least they made the investment back. So they got all the benefits and the investment in the coaching process went back. So this is also a very important outcome. And it is also important to point that virtually all the companies and individuals who hire a coach reported to be satisfied or somewhat satisfied. So it is like, oh, I should say very satisfied or somewhat satisfied, which was a 99%. This is a very important number. Also, if we look at their willingness to go through the process again, which was 98%, it is really amazing. So we talk about one-on-one coaching, and we talk also about bringing coaching to the teams. Can you imagine if the benefits of a one-to-one coaching relation is brought to a team by enabling leaders to use, and I should say also to model, the coaching skills to their collaborators, or what we say, creating a coaching culture? Doing that brings enormous possibilities to the organization. But we have been talking about creating culture, a coaching culture. And what is that? A coaching culture is one in which most people in the organization use a coaching approach as a way of managing, influencing, and communicating. So it is about bringing coaching as bringing coaching present in every interaction in the organization. And I don't know for you, but for me, coaching, it's almost as synonymous of developing. So it has an enormous value. So why is this important? Because as we have seen, coaching maximizes potential and performance, hones coaching skills, demonstrates support for newer leaders, supports organizational pursuit of excellence in leadership competencies, creates a safe haven to receive feedback, as there is nothing hidden, and reflect on ways to make positive changes, build stronger trust in management, enhances team development as it creates the right environment for sharing and discussing ideas in a constructive environment which promotes growth and collaboration. So in a nutshell, coaching is about improving human capacity to deliver superior organizational results. A research developed by Gerson and Associates in 2011 shows that organizations that have a strong senior leadership and cultural supports of coaching have superior results. But look at this. Organizations whose senior leaders very frequently make an effort to coach others have 21% of higher business results, which is really good. But organizations that effectively prepares managers to coach are 130% likely to realize stronger business results. Isn't that amazing? And on top of that, even organizations that just coach or focus in coaching offering coaching to senior leaders, but also organizations that prepare managers, they both get very high engagement numbers, which goes over 30% higher than other organizations. So this is really impressive. These are really impressive results. But I promise you that I was going to present an illustration of the implementation of the Manager as a Coach program. And this is not an easy case. This is a very difficult case because it was in an organization that was dealing with the most difficult times in all their history. This is an organization which was in transition. They had to go from being a government hospital to being a community hospital, which implies, among other things, they need to look for their own funding. So everything was new, the management and the senior team, the guidelines to operate and the accountabilities, the model of patient care, the way of doing business, which affected the union and management relations, the policies, procedures, and systems and technology. And they made a poll, and the employees said, okay, we need more support and skills to deal with this, and also there was a lot of issues with trust, and they said we need a more trusting team and a better work environment. And then that's how they decided to build upon prior one-to-one coaching experience that they have had, and identify the need to grow the internal coaching capabilities. And they decided to engage the key stakeholders in the process, and they partnered with Career Partners International to develop the Manager as a Coach process in the organization. And what did they do? Well, they developed through workshops coaching skills consistent with the coaching model that they have already implemented. They established internal coaching partners, which means that they partnered in the workshop. They decided to choose each leader choose a coaching partner throughout the process to walk through it together and assist each other. Also, they match each leader with an external coach to work also in a one-to-one, and they complete 360 degrees feedback to all the leaders in the program. And this is very interesting because the leaders completed the survey, they received feedback, and after receiving the feedback, they had the option to decide if they want to stay or leave the program. So, what results does this company achieve with the program? Let's look at engagement first. Well, when they compare their engagement numbers to their previous numbers in 2009, this happened in 2009, from 2009 to 2011, they increased the engagement levels of their employees by 23%, which means that they went up from 45% to 68%. If when they compared with the Ontario Hospital Association, the numbers that they had in 2011 were higher than the average for that the hospital's members of that organization. When we go to management engagement, they went from a 61% in 2009 to a 91% in 2011, which is a 30% increase in 2 years. So that is amazing. And when we compare the engagement numbers for the Ontario Hospital Association, it's 22% more than the average that they have. Also, they asked of course, the employees to see what changes they have obtained from 2009 to 2011. And all the metrics that they used improved in a very impressive way. The first one that I would like to point is accessibility and availability, which improved by 19%. Treat me with respect improved by 14%. Listen when I have concern improved by 22%. And look at this. Treat everyone fairly, which is so important. They perceive from the employees that are that the employees perceive that are treated fairly, went up from 49 to 76%. And timely communication improved 21% from 2009 to 2011. So these are very, very good numbers that also suggest that when you find such improvements in the way in which employees perceive the relationship with their leaders, very deep changes are going through also in the relationship that they have, which is great. Well, I'm going to present lastly the evaluations from the participants in the program. And 100% said that they felt that they are now moving forward. They were moving forward. 92% that they got new insights and skills from the process, and 89% that they valued the 360 feedback a lot, and 76% that they increased the sense of self. 71%, that is almost 3/4, that they were closer toward their goals. Almost half that they increased their communication skills. 43% that they increased their conflict resolution skills, and 32% that they improved their interpersonal skills. In my last slide, I have some of the verbatims. I would like to go just over two of them really quick. And it's the first one. This manager says, "It provided me with a safe environment that allowed me to explore how I was feeling, to be able to peel the onion in layers and identify the contributing factors, and to have the confidence to develop strategies to dramatically change the outcome." The second said, "Knowing you have this person, the coach, who you can confide in when you feel safe to discuss issues and problems, therefore providing support to move forward and make a difference in what you do as manager, extremely worthwhile." So through these verbatims, we can confirm the enormous value that coaching brings to the organization, and the safe environment to talk about any issue with confidence. It's invaluable, and it definitely prepares managers to do what they are called to do, to enable people and to lead through people. So now I'm going to hand it back to Robert, who will introduce our next presenter, Trish Kellett. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Yvonne, for that. We're going to we're having a pretty diverse slate today. We're going from Yvonne in Puerto Rico to Trish Kellett, who is with the Hogan organization, and a Southern gal, and then we're going to have a Californian in Sid Snyder. So I guess we're having a nice mix of across the continent and the Caribbean. Trish is going to talk about how to use the Hogan assessment for executive coaching. Certainly not the only tool, but one of the best tools I think is out there for executive coaching. Trish is the director of the Coaching Network and Hogan Assessments. She has a tremendous background, including program for management development at Harvard Business School, an MBA from University of Miami, a bachelor's degree in math from Duke University, and she's held executive positions in marketing, market and product management, operations, and human resources. She's been in a diverse number of sectors and is, about as good as it gets when it comes to having somebody talk to us about the Hogan assessment. So, Trish, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much, Robert, and hello to everyone out there. I'm delighted to be here today. And before we jump into how the Hogan assessment tools can support executive coaching and be a foundation for executive coaching, I'd like to do a brief poll. So, Robert, if you could show the poll. I'd like to know, when you conduct coaching, do you use personality assessments, such as the Hogan or other personality assessments? Do you do 360 feedback, both, or neither? So if you would please weigh in on that.
We're getting results coming in. Trish, give you a few more seconds.
Okay.
We're almost 60%, so everybody else can take a quick look at this, please. Okay, I'm closing the poll, and I'm going to share the results.
Okay, so it looks like 16% for personality, 14% for 360, 41% for both, and 30% for neither. So I'm hoping by the end of our presentation today we will have convinced those of you who checked neither that you really do need assessments as a baseline and as a foundation for executive coaching for the context. So with that, let's move on to the next slide, Robert, please. Before I talk about the Hogan assessment tools specifically, I want to talk to you about the compelling case for high-quality leadership and for what we call strategic self-awareness. This is just a brief slide that shows that the difference between the impact of a top-performing leader and an average leader is at least 50%. And you can see in the other bullets that it has to do with outperforming the competition, with retaining employees, with having engaged leaders. And so many times when we talk about leadership, we think of softer skills, such as motivating or inspiring or communicating. But these kinds of results show that there really are hard numbers associated with having good leaders. And I think these are very consistent with what Yvonne showed you with the making the business case for coaching, that this stuff really does matter and it really does impact the bottom line. It's not such a nice to do, it's a must do to be competitive in today's world. And at the heart of superior leadership is a concept that we call strategic self-awareness. So Robert, if you flip to the next slide, please. I wonder if I'm having the same problem Yvonne had, because, okay, now I see it. The next slide flipped up. Okay, and here again, not to belabor this, but when 75 members of the Stanford Business School were asked what they thought the most important capability for leaders was, their answer was nearly unanimous, and it was self-awareness. And this goes back even to the Greeks of know thyself, this whole thing of self-awareness. Next slide, please. At Hogan, we call this concept strategic self-awareness. And it really is the degree to which a person understands their own capabilities in any competitive endeavor, and they want to understand their own limitations and strengths and also how they compare to others. And I love the graphic here in the right-hand corner. How many of us know someone who thinks that they are a lion, that they're the king of the jungle, when actually they're just probably just a garden variety kitty cat, but when they look in the mirror they see a lion. So it's really important to understand who we are. Many times we we don't understand how we're coming across. Our identity is different from our reputation. And so assessments definitely help with getting to the bottom of that. Next slide, Robert, please. The research on self-awareness really supports its use in coaching as well, because leaders who are not aware, they have blind spots. If somebody gives them feedback, sometimes they miss it, or they ignore it, so they're in denial, or they don't really change over time, so they become obsolete. They become dinosaurs in their field. Or eventually the worst happens. They either top out and never get promoted again, or they derail completely and get fired, so they fail in one way or the other. Whereas leaders who know themselves, who have what we call strategic self-awareness, seek feedback in multiple forms. They consider themselves a work in progress, so they're always asking direct reports and peers and colleagues and bosses for feedback. They accept the feedback they receive and they act on it. They adapt and grow over time. And the bottom line is they're just more successful than people who don't accept feedback and who aren't self-aware. So that leads us to, Robert, if I can have the next slide, please. We have a direct line of sight, then, between strategic self-awareness, that leads to higher quality leadership, which leads to superior business results. And so that's why at Hogan we emphasize so much about strategic self-awareness, because we really do feel that is at the heart of coaching and developing leaders and therefore driving business results. Now, a companion to strategic self-awareness is what we call situational awareness. And situational awareness is being able to read the circumstances, read the tea leaves, know your audience, know when to modify a behavior. And in the coaching that we do, we talk about dialing things up and dialing them down. We consider this a dial and not an on-off switch. And we use the Hogan assessments as tools for facilitating the strategic self-awareness, and also it leads to situational awareness. So the Hogan assessments are really the foundation of a coaching initiative. A little bit about our company before I move on. Hogan was founded by Drs. Bob and Joyce Hogan over 25 years together. And all of our research. What differentiates the Hogans and what Bob and Joyce were so interested in early on and have continued to be interested in is focusing on the workplace, that personality really does have an impact on organizational effectiveness. And so the Hogans and their instruments really have pioneered the use of personality assessments to improve workplace performance. So you'll find that our instruments are very business focused and very real world workplace oriented. Okay, next slide. Now, let's take a look at the different types of assessments. And this is one of the reasons I wanted to do the poll at the first part of my presentation. If you look at, this is our iceberg chart, and if you look at the bottom part of the iceberg that's below the surface, you'll see personality. And personality is really why we do something. And it is measured by the Hogan instruments that I will describe in detail in a minute. But personality really is important because it underlies our behaviors, our actions, our reactions, how we interact with others. It provides insight into how we manage change, execute business strategies, manage people, manage conflict. It provides just a wealth of information. And so a personality assessment definitely should be part of any type of coaching initiative. Then if you look at the part of the iceberg that is right above the surface, you'll see observed behaviors. And the observed behaviors are the how you do it. And this is where a 360 measure is so important, because 360s are very behaviorally based. And so they will tell the coachee how they're being perceived, how they're behaving in the workplace. And then at the very top of the iceberg, you see what we do. And those are our business results, our performance metrics. And you can see that personality and the why you do it and the observed behaviors, the how you do it, underpin the what we do. And so that's why we recommend not only using a personality assessment, specifically the Hogan, but also using a 360 instrument of some sort in coaching, so that you get to the why and the how. Okay, Robert, I'm ready to move on. The Hogan reports that I'm going to describe today, there are 3 reports in a series that we call the Hogan Lead Reports. And we refer to these as the bright side, the dark side, and the inside. The first one, the Hogan Personality Inventory, the bright side, and it's also called the Potential Report, has to do with how we approach others and how we approach our work. And think of that as you on a good day, putting your best foot forward. The second instrument, the Hogan Development Survey that we also call this report, has to do with things and attributes that kill us in our careers. People who have used the Hogan often refer to this as the derailer report. But these are the things that can get us into trouble and get our teams into trouble and damage our reputation. And then the third part of this lead series is the Motives, Values, and Preferences Inventory. And we call this the Values Report. And it describes what motivates people and drives them and makes them want to get up in the morning and go to work and what will fulfill them. And it also has some real implications for the kind of culture a person will create as a leader and the kind of culture in which they will thrive themselves. All 3 of these reports work together. You can't look at them in a vacuum. There's different scales on each one, but they all work together. And that's what the group that I head, the Hogan Coaching Network, does. We provide feedback and interpretation and coaching around the Hogan reports. I have a group of 30 coaches, both domestic in the U.S. and globally. Okay, next slide, please, Robert. This graphic shows once again how we've got 3 pieces to this. The Hogan Potential Report, the bright side, the Challenge Report, the dark side, and then in the middle at our core, the Values Report, the inside of the person, what's going to make them tick. Next slide, please, Robert. And here I've portrayed it a different way. Think of the Values Report, the MVPI, as the work environment that a person will want to create. Then think of the Potential Report, the bright side, as the characteristics that a person has to create that environment. And then think of the Challenge Report, also called the Derailer Report, the HDS, the dark side, as the things that can get in the way, the performance risks. Yet another way to look at this is to think of what comes out in the Values Report as what you want out of life. Think of the bright side, the Potential Report, is what will help you achieve it. And then think of the dark side, the Challenge Report, as what will prevent you from doing this. And those are all things that it's critical for a person to consider in a coaching initiative. Okay, next one, Robert. This slide really summarizes kind of everything you ever wanted to know about the HPI. It talks about the number of scales, 7 scales, what it shows. It actually shows the scales over on the side. And I'm going to unpack this over the next few slides, but I wanted to include this as a summary slide because I know you'll get copies of the slides. So this is a good place for you to refer back to if you want to refresh your memory on these. And I've got one on the HPI, one on the HDS, and on the MVPI. So remember these as summary slides. And Robert, we can go ahead to the next one. The Hogan Personality Inventory has 7 different scales, and it concerns how you approach others, how you approach your work, It has a lot to tell us about leadership style. And although today we're talking about the Hogan instruments and the concept of coaching and development, the instruments can also be used in selection, because as you'll see when we look at the slides, at the scales, you'll see that these can be very indicative of the type of job that a person will succeed in. Okay, next one, please, Robert. These are the 7 scales that are on the Hogan Personality Inventory. And with our time constraints this morning, we don't have time to get into each of the scales. But I wanted to give you an overview that supports natural styles and preferences. And there's no such thing as a good or a bad score. The scale goes from 0 to 100 on a continuum. And you can't say that high scores are necessarily good or that low are necessarily bad. There are strengths and watch-outs associated with each end of the continuum. And you can't look at these scales in a vacuum, because they can trump each other or exacerbate or mitigate. For example, someone who's really strong on, look at ambition, the 2nd scale. If they're really high on ambition, they'll be very assertive and results-oriented and very leader-like and very competitive. And if that is associated with someone who's very low on the interpersonal sensitivity scale, if they're low on the interpersonal sensitivity scale, they're going to be, the good news is they'll be very direct and objective, but the bad news is they can take that over the top and be critical and harsh. So if you've got a combination of somebody who's high on ambition and low on interpersonal sensitivity, that's a very different personality than someone who is high on both. If they're high on interpersonal sensitivity, they'll be very results-oriented, but they'll also be focused on people as well. It will soften that hard edge of being such a type A. So that's just an example of how you need someone to interpret these scores and to put the feedback into the context of the job. As I said, these are natural styles and preferences. You need to think of this not as your destiny, because behavior can be modified, and that's what coaching is all about. That's how you get those results that Yvonne was talking about, is through a coaching relationship. Okay, Robert, let's move on. And this next slide that looks like it's coming up is the summary slide for the dark side, the challenge report for the HDS. So once again, remember, this is a slide you can come back to if you want a quick review. But the HDS, the dark side, has 11 scales, and these are behaviors and attributes that typically come out when we're under pressure, when we're stressed. And Robert, you can move on to the next one. And I don't know if you can see from the slide, but the red portion that's highlighted that says HDS on the circle, the graphic on the right hand of the slide, it actually says overused strengths that can get a person into trouble. And I want to emphasize that many times our greatest strengths, when they're overused, become our greatest watch out. And I'm sure all of you have seen that in the coaching that you've done. And that's only natural, that as we grow and develop, when our back's against the wall, when we're in a tight spot, we rely on our strengths to get us out of it. And that's how they get overly developed. And so on the challenge report, the derailers, we typically see strengths that are overused because the person is stressed, or they have a tight due date, or they're in a bad mood. Another time that the derailers come out is when a person lets their guard down. That's what this term complacency means. They let their guard down. They're around people they know and love, and they don't need to manage their reputation anymore. And so many times our family and friends see the derailers come out because we don't have to manage our image around them. But these are the things that can get people into trouble. And next slide, Robert, we'll take a quick look at the scales, at the 11 scales. These are the things that can derail a person, get them into trouble. They're usually very memorable. You'll see that this slide shows that these 11 scales actually, in everyday circumstances, can be strengths for people. It's only when they're left unchecked, when they're not reined in, when they go over the top, that they become derailers. These scales have very cultural connotations and cultural context. Something that's a derailer in one environment might not be a derailer in another environment. I once worked for an organization doing consulting work for them where it was an engineering culture, very competitive culture where people tooted their own horns, beat their own chests, bragged about their accomplishments. The way to succeed in that organization was you made yourself look good by making other people look bad. And that is what, in Hogan terms, would come out on the bold scale of being, exceptionally self-promoting and smug and it's all about me. In most cultures, that would be a huge derailer because nobody likes somebody who is a braggart like that. It happened in this particular culture that I was working in that it was a derailer if you weren't bold because that was just the way the culture operated. So once again, you need in coaching initiatives to look at what's going on in the coachee's culture and what things are derailing them and what things have they learned over the years to keep in check. We look at both elevated scores on the derailers, and we also have started looking at really low scores because sometimes really low scores and absence of these things can get people into trouble. It's been said that on the derailers report that a high score will get you fired, but a low score will get you passed over. And so in coaching, you want to look at both of these. Now let's move quickly to the third report. Next slide, Robert. This is the values report, the motives, values, and preferences instrument, and we call this the inside. And once again, this is a good summary slide for you to come back to refresh your memories on the number of scales and what the instrument actually measures. So next slide, Robert, will unpack this one a little bit. As I said earlier, the MVPI, the inside, the values report, is really a measure, not so much of personality like the first two reports, but of motivations. These are the things that ring our bells and make us happy and make us feel fulfilled and how we'll feel satisfied and motivated. And so it's really important to get in touch with these, not only so that the coachee knows how they will be fulfilled, but there is an aspect of this report that's just critical for leaders to look at. And that has to do with the second bullet, that it will give the coach insights into the kind of culture that the leader is creating for his or her group. We call these values unconscious biases because they are the lens through which we view the world. We take them around with us all the time in our business life and in our personal life. We can't help it because these are our values and this is how we see the world. And so they influence how we make decisions, how we judge, how we reward and punish. And so it's very important for a leader to think about how they are viewing the world and how that's playing out in the workplace. It's also really important for the leader to think about, or the coachee to think about, whether they are happy in the culture of the organization. I find that that culture is one of the things that's really underwhelmed when someone is looking for a new job. They do a lot of due diligence on the company and the job. Will it use their knowledge, skills, and abilities? And what's the salary? What are the perks? Who is my boss? But they don't do enough due diligence on the culture itself, and that can make someone pretty miserable. It's like wearing somebody else's clothes if you're in a culture that's diametrically opposed to your values. Next slide, please, Robert. These are the 10 scales that are on the motives, values, and preferences inventory, the different ways that we describe cultures and values. And sometimes I call this the different strokes for different folks, because a leader over their career will not always work with people or for people or have people work for them who are high and low on the same scales. For example, a leader who's very low on recognition doesn't need a lot of stroking. They don't need a whole lot of pats on the back. That's not what's going to make them want to get up and go to work in the morning. But if they are working particularly in an organization like sales or marketing, I think recognition is in sales and marketing DNA. They love recognition. That leader will really have to dial up recognizing his or her own people. So this is a report that helps the leader realize that just because I don't need it doesn't mean that the people who work for me or I'm working around don't need it. So this is a really good lens to look at what will motivate the coachee and also the kind of culture that they are creating for the organization that they're in. I recently worked with a leader who was very high on aesthetics. He had headed a marketing organization. He was the chief marketing officer. And he had been promoted to be the general manager for a country. And he was very low on commerce. And he was very high on aesthetics, which is typical of people who are in marketing and creative kinds of roles. But he's very low on commerce. And he really was going to have to dial that up because now he had profit and loss responsibility for the organization. And it just wouldn't come naturally to him to look at situations through a profit and loss, through a monetary lens. And he gave me a really good example. He said that they were redoing, he happened to be in the restaurant business, they were redoing all of their restaurant outlets, and that he got very personally involved in that. And he said they had the best looking restaurants anywhere on the planet, but that his finance people were all over him because he had exceeded the budget so much. And so that's just an anecdote around how these values really do play out in the workplace. It just wasn't really on his radar screen. But believe me, it was on his radar screen after the coaching, because he knew it was a case of what got you here won't get you there. And he knew that since he was changing jobs that he needed to dial up his commerce lens. Okay, next slide, Robert. I'd like to close with this. I know that we have talked about 3 reports. We talked very rapidly due to the time constraints this morning. But these 3 reports, the Hogan Lead Series, really does give a clear understanding to leaders and to coachees of their performance capabilities, their strong suits, their challenges or their derailers, and then their core drivers and the kind of culture that they will create. And they're all based on this whole concept of strategic self-awareness. And it's that strategic self-awareness and the situational awareness that makes good leaders great. So thank you very much for letting me join you this morning, and I'll turn it back over to Robert.
Thank you very much, Trish, for that presentation. I think people will get a better sense, those who are not familiar with the Hogan, of what it can do for coaching. As I told you before, after getting certified, I look at my derailers every morning just to make sure I'm on the right track. I want to remind people you can start putting up questions on the questions tab, which we can go through them at the end of the presentation. And also, I want to apologize. For some reason, our screen is getting this window asking us to reformat the colors, and we're afraid to click yes or no, thinking that we may get a blank screen or something. So we'll just continue exiting that. I apologize for the inconvenience, but we feel at this stage that that's probably the best thing that we can do. With that said, I want to introduce our Californian, even though he resides in Florida now, Mr. Sid Snyder. Sid is a senior executive consultant now at CPI Florida Caribbean. He has got a master's in psychology from California State University. He's a former director at one of the large global accounting firms, Deloitte, where he had an interesting experience dealing with coaching, among other things. He was director of the Office of Executive Coaching for Partners, and that's a group of well over 5,000 people. And he also had an interesting role assisting partners with special needs, and I will let him talk a bit more about that. He's also been a speaker at conference board events. And Sid, welcome. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Robert. It's good to be here. Let's take a peek at that polling question. We've got one quick one that will kind of set the baseline for us, looking at whether we're coaching with internal resources, external, or some combination. So here's that polling question.
Okay, Sid has been launched. Let's give it a few seconds, please. We're almost halfway there. Okay, last 5 seconds, everyone. And here are the results.
Well, it's great to see that a number of organizations use external and internal. Fully 50% of the respondents. I think that's having the best of both worlds, and that's terrific. A fair amount of you are using internal coaches, and we've heard a lot about the power of that from Yvonne. And some aren't using coaches at all, but hope to in the future, and that's a good thing. So with that, let us go ahead and begin the presentation, and we'll go right to the first slide, Robert. I believe that deploying coaches within an organization can be the single most potent development tool available. And you've essentially heard this twice already from the other presenters. We're lined up perfectly here. The benefits of a third party collecting feedback on an individual being coached and working with him or her to address a handful of coaching goals as a result and part of the feedback and assessments can and often does bring about improved performance on the job, increased skill in managing people, a vision for the future of the organization, greater job satisfaction, greater followership, improved communications between employees, be it up, down, or across, and most importantly, the opportunity to improve business results. Whether your organization is a for-profit or a not-for-profit organization, manufacturing company, or a services organization, all organizations have business goals. Tying coaching to the business objectives is not just good business. It is, I believe, what ought to be the business of the HR professionals and the leaders of the coaching resources. My thesis here is that these great and wonderful things that can accrue from coaching in an organization are not guaranteed. And I use the word can deliberately here when describing these things. I assert that identifying a coach and writing him or her a check and then moving on to the next project and doing little more is not the way to have an effective coaching program or manage coaching resources and maximize the value of coaching. In order for an organization to consistently realize the value of coaching, there are a number of things that organization itself must do. These things usually fall to someone in the HR department, but need not. What's critical is that the individual coordinating coaching be positioned in the organization as a peer to those who work with coaches and to be close to or kind of near the higher levels of the organization. And here's the reason that I believe that's important. Sometimes an executive may want to work with a coach, but there are other more viable developmental resources available. Coaching is not a one-size-fits-all proposition. Sometimes a respectful discussion about alternatives to coaching needs to happen with the senior executive. Secondly, individuals who want to work with a coach or have someone in their business unit that they'd like to work with a coach might strike up a conversation at the barbershop or at the kids' soccer game and learn that so-and-so who lives down the street is an executive coach and I want to use him or her. Let's use him or her. Well, that coach may or may not be a real asset to the coaching profession. I believe, and I've seen many that are very, very good, and I've seen a number of coaches who aren't so good. There are great coaches around, and there are coaches who, in my view, have not a clue what they're doing and should be in another line of work. Being able to differentiate coach talent and holding the line as to which coaches are presented to do the work in your organization is critical. A bad coach who does bad work can torpedo the whole coaching deal in your organization and tarnish the credibility of the HR department. So the need for executive coaching needs to be ascertained, and the best coaching services your organization can procure should be the order of the day, be they external or internal resources. Let's go to the next slide, Robert. There are primarily three approaches to the deployment of coaching, and we saw that in the poll question just a moment ago. Coaches who are external, coaches who are internal, meaning on the payroll of the organization, and then there's a combination of these two resources, and there are advantages to both the use of external and internal coaching, and the optimal approach might be the combination, as we spoke about a moment ago. We've heard today about the amazing results which can accrue when an organization uses coaching broadly. Cultural and broad organizational benefits are a likely outcome of the well-managed use of internal coaches across an organization. My experience at Deloitte was to provide coaching resources for the partners of the firm, who are the owners. In this case, external coaches were preferred, as they don't get any more senior as an executive than our partners at Deloitte. They are the owners, so you can essentially think of C-suite people. So let's go to the next slide, talk about how one qualifies a coach. The specifics of this would be another hour of presentation, and we're not going to do that. But I'm going to touch on those items which I think you'll want to learn more about and think about when you interview a potential coach, whether they be internal or external. The first thing I'd mention is education, both generally and specific coach training. There's some terrific training programs out there for coaching and for coaches. And then there's some that's not so good. And then there's a lot of coaches don't have any training at all. What's their experience as an executive coach? Have they been doing this for 90 days or have they been doing this for 9 years? And what other career experience have they had? Did they come to the coaching game late in their career? And did the other work that they did, is it kind of helpful to the coaching preparation for all that the coach can bring to the party? I think familiarity or coaching experience with the organization's industry is very helpful. If you're a hospital and you're looking for a coach for an a senior leader in a hospital, wouldn't it be great to find a coach who has coached in other healthcare environments and in hospitals? And they're out there. Sometimes you have to look for them, but I think familiarity with the industry of your organization is a real plus. I also think familiarity is a coaching experience with individuals of the same or similar function as the executive is helpful. As an example, someone who has coached CFOs or senior financial people acquires through that coaching experience an understanding, fundamental and perhaps rudimentary, but an appreciation and an understanding of the role of being a CFO or a director of accounting or whatever in that function. I think that's important. The coach's methodology is very important. If they don't have one, then I think, and can't articulate it, then I think you ought not consider using them. The coach ought to have a sense of where he or she starts and what is the next steps and what do we do after that, and how does the coaching progress, how does it move, what are the key components that they bring to the coaching experience. We heard from Trish about a terrific assessment tool The Hogan really is an outstanding tool, and I always ask an executive coach, what assessment tools do you use, and what do you like the best? And oftentimes I hear the Hogan. Sometimes I hear, I don't use assessment tools, and in that case, I generally move on to talk to a different coach. Intellectual capability is important. It's important to try to gauge that so that you don't put an executive coach in front of a senior executive who is as smart as a whip, because he or she is going to figure out that they're working with someone who just isn't as smart. And I think trying to kind of, peer the intellectual capability of the coach and the coachee is important. And the ability to articulate. If a coach can't really be concise and be clear in their verbal communications, they're not going to get the job done. The orientation of life coaching versus coaching in a business setting has historically been important to me, and I think is something that whoever interviews or qualifies coaches would want to learn about. How about ongoing coaching with a competitor to your organization? Is that something that's okay, potentially not okay? And that's a business decision for you guys to make. The coach's view of being paid for travel time to and from coaching sessions is important to know on the front end, and depending on how they answer it, you may or may not have a good match, depending on your organization's practice. The coach's experience with fees. I always want to know, what do you make? What's a typical coaching engagement pay you? And I like to know that pretty early in the process of qualifying the coach. And sometimes that's a difficult, they maybe aren't too willing to answer that question, but I think it's an important question. And what is the typical coaching engagement fee? And then what do they do beyond executive coaching? Are they full-time? Is this how they make their livelihood? That's extremely important to me, because that means they must probably be pretty good. If they're not, doing something else Monday through Friday, and then they try to do executive coaching at 6 o'clock at night during the week as a supplement to their day job. So let's go to the next slide. I think we've talked a lot about what points to consider for qualifying a coach. I'm a strong believer that a coachee ought to have choice in coaches. So most of the time I presented, when I was with Deloitte, 2 coaches, rarely 3 and rarely 1. When I presented 1, I would tell the coachee I have another coach ready to come in if he or she would like to meet a second one, but I shared my view that the first and hopefully the only coach I presented is ideally suited. I didn't push. I just sometimes needed to get coaching engagements started sooner than later, and didn't want to get bogged down in the coach selection process for business reasons. Let me interject here, too, that I subscribe to the philosophy that the more coaching a particular coach does within an organization, the smarter he or she is about the culture of the organization, and the more they know about the players at the top. The more they know and understand these things, even as an outsider, the more effective they can be, and the more quickly they can establish a good rapport with and the trust of the person they coach. Secondly, and of equal importance, the more work an individual coach does with your organization, the easier it is for the coaching director, the one who leads the coaching practice, to build a relationship of trust with the coach. You'd have the opportunity over time to help the coach see that you and he or she are partners in this work. You can be and should be the go-to person for the coach when there are confusing organizational issues, as an example, that may be impacting coaching success. You want the coach to know you are there for him or her, you are an ally, and you control future opportunities for him or her to work within your organization. And you want his or her loyalty. You want to become, over time, a valued client to the coach. At some point in the coach selection process, or perhaps just before the process begins, the coachee should be informed as to the organization's expectations regarding his or her availability for coaching sessions, the likelihood of homework between coaching sessions, and a typical coach tool of collecting feedback on the coachee, usually 360, because this feedback collection and subsequent reporting is the gist of the feedback that becomes the platform on which the coach and the coachee determine specific objectives for the coaching. With these objectives, it's easy to determine whether the coaching intervention is going to be successful. The coach and the coachee need to agree on a roadmap, and I encourage the sponsor of the coaching, or the leader or boss of the coachee, to also agree with coaching goals where practical. Sponsor buy-in goes a long way to connect dots and create alignment. If the director of the coaching program knows the coachee and the circumstances well, it is certainly appropriate to ask the coach to include self-assessment tools such as the Hogan as part of the coaching process. Let's go to the next slide, Robert. Briefly on the contracting for coaching. The contract, I believe, should always be initiated by the organization, and it should be the organization's template and not the coach's. I like to think about this as the organization is actually the client, and I want to communicate that in a subtle but very clear way. It's usually the organization, after all, which is paying the coach's fee. The detailed content of the coaching contract is also a subject for another webinar, but most coaching contracts should include the following: the start date of the coaching, the planned conclusion date of the coaching. These dates are important because they communicate to the coach the pace you expect to be maintained of the coaching and then the frequency of coaching sessions you expect. The inclusion of a 360 feedback process, if that'll be a part of the coaching, and or a self-assessment. The requirement of the coach to present proof of insurance, the fee schedule, what will your organization pay and when, the requirement of an informal report by the coach to the coaching program director, the midpoint of the coaching as to forward movement, nothing confidential, and nothing about coach content, but is progress being made, are milestones being met, is the coachee being available for coaching sessions, and so forth. Then I always have in my contracts a final report that is presented verbally to me. I don't need it in writing, but I want the coach to be on the phone with me or to come sit in my office and say, here's how this went, here's what worked well, et cetera, and so forth. The organization's expectations regarding confidentiality and language, spelling out the organization's expectation of respecting privacy of business, financial data of clients, customers, and other proprietary information. So how do we define success? Let's go to the next slide, Robert. At Deloitte, we looked for the success of individual coaching engagements as measured by self-reports from the coachee and the sponsor or leader or manager of the coachee. Secondly, and most importantly, we looked at what benefits might have accrued to the organization. My first attempt to collect this kind of feedback was not successful. I asked the coach and the manager to provide me a one-paragraph email in which they were to address what worked in their view, what didn't work, what was helpful, what wasn't, whether and how behaviors at work have changed, and so forth. This approach didn't work as our partners at Deloitte couldn't quite get around to sending an email to me. A few did, but I was spending way too much time expediting, and in some cases they just could never get around to it. My second effort was similar to the first, but more successful, and that is I left a voice message for them, and I asked them to simply press reply when they were driving home from work that night or some other time, and simply talk to me about what they thought of the coaching, how it worked, how it didn't work. And then we would turn that over to the voicemail and transcribe it. And we'd have that paragraph, but we had to get it verbally instead of in writing. I don't know, maybe that's unique to my organization. After a few years of doing that, though, we became more sophisticated, and we actually developed a pre- and post-coaching tool. And we were able to identify the coaching goals and have the stakeholders, the coachee, the sponsor or leader, speak specifically and rate specifically how the coaching intervention changed behaviors and moved forward on the goals articulated for the coaching itself. And that seemed to work pretty well. I guess I would conclude here, Robert, in the interest of getting time for questions, by saying that there's an art and a science to running an effective, powerful coaching program. It need not be very big. Deloitte's was big, but if there's 5 or 6 coaching projects in a year, or there are 2 or 3 executive coaches on your payroll, that you still want to do as much as you can to stack the deck for the outstanding results and change and benefits that can come from using coaches in your organization, internal or external, or both. That winds me up, Robert, so I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Sid, very much. I encourage you in the audience, whenever you get a chance to connect with Sid, as we will continue to travel the Florida Caribbean circuit and taking Sid with us to talk to him and learn about his pretty unique experience in his role at Deloitte, which is a wealth of information for many of us. We are going to open it up to questions. We have about 5 minutes left, so if you can put in a few questions, that would be really, really great. I would appreciate that. And while we do that, let me share with you another registration poll question, just for reference, while we get a few questions in. And this I found interesting. Which statement best applies to your organization regarding coaching and leadership development? Most of you said management supports it, but I need help and resources developing a program. So it seems that at least half of you feel that management is saying, yeah, let's do this, but it also seems that management doesn't quite get how to provide your resources, or perhaps what does it entail. So I think that utilizing some of the material that Yvonne presented about the business case can help you. Also, where you think, the top and the 30% answer, which is this is essential to our success, but management is not supportive. I think building the business case is also very, very important. So, to all of you HR people in the audience, sometimes we get too bogged down with process and methodology, but I think first, when you're talking to your leaders outside the HR department, you really need to build a business case. And I think some of the metrics that Yvonne presented can help you with that. Now, I have a question. Yvonne, are you there?
Yes.
So here's a question for you. Say you're in an organization and you want your managers to be involved, to become coaches. Do you think that they need, how do you do that? Formal training, have them read a book, just tell them to be coaches? What is your experience when you've seen organizations, and what have you seen work and fail?
Well, there are different ways of doing that. You don't need managers to be like a certified professional coach, which requires 750 hours of training. But a program like Manager as a Coach, it's really important, and because it can provide a sound framework of knowledge for using the skills in their day-to-day interactions in the organization and get the amazing results that we have been talking about in this session. Because, a manager can read a book. Well, which book is going to read? And it's not enough to read a book, even though that helps. That always helps because it increases awareness. The program, the Manager as a Coach program, or the coaching experience builds up the manager skills, which is needed to use them in the day-to-day, and also, as I said, to model it with their employees and other constituencies in the organization.
Okay, well, thank you. And I want to move along to 2 more questions in the interest of time. Trish, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, I said earlier that I think about my derailers every morning. But can people really change their personalities?
And I get that question a lot, Robert. It is really not a case of changing one's personality, but it's a case of modifying one's behavior. And there we're right back to that self-awareness and the situational awareness, that if we are aware of our strong suits and our derailers, we can either dial them up or dial them back. We know when to use them and when to rein them in. So it's really more behavior modification and flexing one's behavior, flexing one's style, acting out of one's natural comfort zone. It's a case of behavior modification as opposed to true changing your personality. You know, all the time coaches will say, well, I can't do that. That's just the way I am. Well, it might be the way they're hardwired, but they can certainly control how they manifest that to the outside world. So think behavior modification as opposed to true personality change or morphing into a transformer.
Well, I don't know. You just gave more hope to my wife or the opposite. Here is one for Sid. And Sid, you may be able to answer this, given the fact that working for Deloitte, you may have interacted with executives outside the organization. And the question is this: do CEOs need to be convinced often by HR that executive coaching is really important to the organization? And we're talking C-suite. Or do you think, in your experience, have you seen that most C-suite or CEOs sort of get this?
Well, there are a lot of CEOs that don't get it. I have no doubt about that. I was blessed by a CEO who worked with his executive coach for 8 years. And he did all sorts of different things. He had the 360s, and then a year or two after he was really into it, he had all of his direct reports work with an executive coach. And so in Deloitte, I think somewhat unusually, there was a real top-down drive over the years, and it was in no time at all we were doing 75 or 100 coaching engagements a year. So in my 8-year tenure in that role, there were several hundred partners work with coaches, and it's going on today. So sometimes it bubbles up. Sometimes there's kind of a visionary, or someone reads a book or hears something about it, or an HR director talks to somebody. Maybe you benefit from working with an executive coach. But I'm a real fan of piloting because I think the use of coaches will sell itself over time. If done right and in the hands of a great coach, I mean, it's just it can be transforming for the individual. And there's your ambassador. There's someone with lots of credibility already within the organization who can partner with HR to go buy a cup of coffee to the more senior people or the CEO. So it takes patience. It sometimes takes time, but an organization can really move to embracing coaching. I've seen it happen a lot.
Yeah, and I think that I would encourage people to look at the bursting study that we talked about here. You can have an individual perform better through coaching, but if you want to drive organization-wide performance through coaching, the bursting study is pretty telling. It basically tells you there are 3 elements that you need. You need formal training, not certification, but some kind of framework of learning on how to coach. Not just being coached, but how do I, as a manager or supervisor, as a leader, become a coach? It also tells you that you need to have a company that has a culture that embraces coaching. And number 3, it tells you that you need, and it goes to Sid's point at Deloitte, it has to have a top-down approach. You need to have a C-suite that says, I believe in this. I may not get it all the time, but I'm going to, try to model behaviors that reflect coaching, because that's how the organization as a whole sees that management is buying in to this. Now, we've run out of time, and I do want to answer the question for those of you that said, I need more support or resources. Certainly want to do our last 30-second pitch on our services. Do think of us if you need help with with executive coaching and leadership development, and here are some of the things that we do. We do provide executive coaching. We have leadership development programs such as the Manager's Coach, another program called Learn to Lead for entry-level or junior leaders and supervisors. We have a great program called Career GPS. We do leadership assessments, including the Hogan assessment. Senior Leader Crisis Triage Intervention. It's a mission project that we're doing with Sid based on his invaluable experience working with Deloitte in similar situations. And then program design and evaluation. If you're looking at revamping your program, be it on executive coaching or leadership development, give us a call. And lastly, conflict resolution is an area that we're intimately familiar with. We do have staff and offices throughout Florida and the Caribbean, so do give us a call. The best way to reach us is with Ms. Ariane Parra. She's in our Orlando office, but is completely bilingual. And you can also visit our website, cpi-florida.com. We will have a link that we'll send to you for an evaluation, and also a link of where to find the recording and the slide deck after the event. Any questions, please call us at the number you see on the screen. Extension 240 is Ariane's extension, and her email is apara@cpiflorida.com. With that, I want to thank everybody for being with us today. I want to thank all of the participants. And you can tell you have a great event when you're closing and you still have most of the people, most of the attendees on, and we do, which speaks to the quality of our speakers. So I really appreciate, Trish, Yvonne, Sid, your time and the expertise that you brought to this webinar today. And with that, I wish you all a great day, and until next time, take care.